I thought I'd escaped everything when I left Germany with nothing but a suitcase. But years later, in a crowded mall in Belgium, my past tried to humiliate me, not knowing my silence was backed by a life built across Europe. The train from Brussels to Salzburg had been long. I watched the landscapes shift, flat Belgian fields giving way to the rolling hills of Germany, then finally the sharp, snow-dusted peaks of Austria. I hadn't been back in nearly 4 years. Not since the night I left with one suitcase, a train ticket purchased with the last of my savings, and no explanation for anyone. My mother's house sat on the edge of a quiet village, the kind of place where everyone knew your name and your business before you'd finished unpacking. The wooden shutters were freshly painted. The garden, immaculate. Ingrid had always cared more about appearances than truth. When I knocked, she opened the door with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Anneliese," she said, her voice measured. "You came." I said I would. She stepped aside. The house smelled of roasted meat and rosemary. Margot was already in the dining room, setting plates with the precision of someone preparing for battle, not dinner. "Look who decided to show up," Margot said without looking at me. Her blonde hair was pulled back tight, her posture perfect. She had always been the daughter who stayed, who followed the rules, who made our mother proud. "Hello, Margot." She finally glanced up. Her eyes swept over me, my plain coat, my worn boots, the absence of jewelry. I saw the judgment before she even spoke. "You look tired," she said. "I've been traveling for 4 years." Ingrid cleared her throat. "Let's sit. Dinner is ready." We took our places at the table. The silence was thick, broken only by the clink of silverware and the scrape of chairs. I knew what was coming. Margot had never been one to let silence linger. "So," she began, cutting into her schnitzel with unnecessary force. "Where have you been exactly?" "Around," I said. "Around." She laughed, sharp and bitter. "You vanish without a word. No phone calls, no letters, and now you show up and say around." "Margot, please," Ingrid murmured. But Margot wasn't finished. "Do you have any idea what you put us through? The questions people asked? The shame." I met her gaze. "Shame?" "Yes, shame. People thought you'd gotten into trouble. Or worse. And we had no answers." "You could have told them the truth," I said quietly. "What truth? That you ran away like a child?" I set down my fork. "I didn't run away, Margot. I left. What's the difference? One is panic. The other is a choice." Her face flushed. "And what kind of choice leaves your family to wonder if you're dead?" Ingrid's hand trembled as she reached for her wine. "Girls, please." "No, Mama, she needs to hear this." Margot leaned forward. "Do you have money, Anneliese? A job? A plan? Or did you come back because you finally ran out of options?" I could have told her then. I could have explained the apartment in Luxembourg, the consulting work that took me to Stockholm and Dublin, the life I'd built in boardrooms and quiet cafes where no one knew my name or my history. I could have told her about Elias. But I didn't. Because some people don't ask questions to understand. They ask to confirm what they've already decided about you. "I'm managing," I said. Margot scoffed. "Managing? That's what you call it. What would you like me to call it?" "I'd like you to be honest, for once." The words hung in the air. Ingrid was staring at her plate. Margot was staring at me. And I realized, sitting there in that dining room with its lace tablecloths and inherited china, that nothing had changed. I had been gone for years, crossed borders, rebuilt myself entirely. And to them, I was still the girl who didn't measure up. "I'm going to step outside," I said, standing. "Of course you are," Margot muttered. I walked out into the cold evening air, my breath forming clouds in front of me. The village lights flickered in the distance. Somewhere, a dog barked. I wrapped my arms around myself, not from the cold, but from the weight of old wounds reopening. My phone buzzed. A message from Elias. "How is it?" I typed back, exactly as I expected. His reply came quickly. "You don't have to stay." But I did, because leaving the first time had been necessary. Leaving now would be surrender. I went back inside. Dinner continued in strained politeness. Margot asked pointed questions about my situation. Ingrid changed the subject whenever the tension peaked. And I answered in careful half-truths, giving them nothing to hold on to. When dessert was finished, Margot stood and began clearing plates. I'll help, I offered. I've got it, she said coldly. Ingrid touched my hand. She'll come around, labeling. I nodded, but I knew better. Margot hadn't asked where I'd been out of concern. She'd asked because my absence had been inconvenient. My silence had been unforgivable. And the worst part? She had no idea what she'd helped set in motion while I was gone. But she would. 2 days later, I took a train to Brussels. I told Ingrid I needed to pick up some things before heading back. She didn't ask where back was. Margot didn't say goodbye. The Galeries Royales St. Hubert was crowded that afternoon. Tourists moved in clusters, their phones raised, capturing the ornate glass ceilings and polished marble floors. I'd come for a specific boutique near the far end, a place I'd been meaning to visit for months. Nothing urgent, just a quiet errand in a city where no one knew me. I was looking at scarves when I heard the voice. Annalise. I froze. That voice. I knew it the way you know the sound of breaking glass or a door slamming shut. I turned slowly. Victor stood 10 feet away, holding a shopping bag from an expensive menswear store. He looked older, gray threading through his dark hair, lines etched deeper around his mouth. But the posture was the same. The confidence. The way he occupied space as if he owned it. I thought that was you, he said, stepping closer. I didn't respond. He smiled. Not warmly. What are you doing here? Shopping. In Brussels? His eyes traveled over me. My simple coat. My plain shoes. The absence of anything that screamed wealth. I didn't think this was your kind of place anymore. Things change, I said evenly. Apparently not much. He gestured vaguely at my outfit. Still dressing like you're invisible, I see. A few people nearby glanced over. Victor's voice had that quality, loud enough to draw attention without technically shouting. I'm in a hurry, I said, turning back to the scarves. Of course you are. Always rushing off somewhere, never quite landing anywhere solid. He moved beside me, close enough that I could smell his cologne. Expensive. Overpowering. You know, I used to wonder what happened to you. After you left. I'm sure you survived the mystery. He laughed, short, dismissive. I did. More than survived, actually. Business has been excellent. Expanded into Luxembourg. Even opened an office in Amsterdam. You remember Luxembourg, don't you? You always talked about wanting to go there. I said nothing. But here you are, he continued, wandering around a mall in Brussels, looking like. He paused, as if searching for the kindest word. Well, looking like someone who left with big dreams and came back with empty pockets. A woman pushing a stroller slowed down, sensing the tension. An elderly couple pretended to examine a display while clearly listening. You always had ideas above your station, Victor said, his voice dripping with false concern. I tried to tell you that. Tried to help you see reality. But you didn't want to hear it. I heard you just fine. Did you? He leaned in slightly. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like I was right. You ran off to prove something. And here you are, alone, broke, shopping for discount scarves. My fingers tightened around the silk in my hand. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, the old anger threatening to surface. But I'd learned something in the years since I'd left. Anger is what people like Victor feed on. Silence is what starves them. Nothing to say, he pressed. That's new. You used to have so many opinions. I set the scarf down carefully and looked at him. Really looked at him. At the expensive watch. The designer bag. The carefully maintained image of success. I hope things continue to go well for you, Victor, I said quietly. His smile faltered. Just slightly. Because that wasn't the response he wanted. He wanted defensiveness. Embarrassment. Proof that he still had power over me. That's it, he said. That's all you have to say? That's all. You know, I ran into your mother last year. In Vienna. She mentioned you were unwell. That you'd had some kind of breakdown. My stomach tightened. She said that. Not in those words. But it was clear. The way she talked about you. With that sad, pitying tone. Like you were a project that never quite came together. He shrugged. I felt bad for her, honestly. Having a daughter who just disappears. No explanation. No consideration for the people left behind. The crowd around us had grown. A small semicircle of strangers pretending not to watch while absolutely watching. You always were selfish, Victor continued, his voice rising slightly. running away instead of facing your responsibilities, leaving other people to clean up your messes. If you're listening right now, help me prove something wrong. My mother once said this channel would never even reach 300 subscribers, but I believe stories like this deserve to be heard. If you believe that too, subscribe to Tales Methlyn. Let's keep breathing life into stories that were never meant to stay silent. Now, let's continue. Responsibilities, I repeated softly. Yes, responsibilities. You know what those are, don't you? Or did you forget while you were off finding yourself, or whatever romantic nonsense you convinced yourself you were doing? I could have walked away. I could have ended it there. But something in his tone, the casual cruelty, the certainty that he was untouchable, kept me rooted. You're right, I said. He blinked. What? You're right. I did leave. And I didn't explain myself to anyone. Well, at least you're finally admitting it. I'm admitting I left. Not that I was wrong to. His jaw tightened. You really haven't changed. No, I said. I really have. He opened his mouth to respond, but then something shifted. His gaze moved past me, toward the entrance. His expression changed. The smugness drained away, replaced by something I'd never seen on his face before. Confusion, then recognition, then fear. I didn't turn around. Not yet, because I already knew what he was seeing. The black car, the men in tailored suits, and Elias, stepping out into the afternoon light. The crowd's murmur shifted. Heads turned toward the entrance where 3 men in dark suits had positioned themselves with the kind of quiet authority that suggested they weren't decorative. Through the glass archway, I could see the car, a black Mercedes S-Class with diplomatic plates, parked precisely where no one else would dare. Victor's mouth hung open slightly. The shopping bag slipped from his fingers. Elias walked through the entrance with the unhurried grace of someone who had never needed to prove anything. Tall, silver threading through his dark hair, wearing a charcoal suit that whispered money without shouting it. His eyes found mine immediately, the way they always did in crowded rooms. He crossed the marble floor. The crowd parted instinctively. Annalise, he said, his voice warm. He spoke English with that slight Swedish accent I'd grown to love. I'm sorry I'm late. The meeting ran over. He kissed my cheek, then his hand settled at the small of my back. Protective, familiar. Only then did he acknowledge Victor. I'm sorry, Elias said politely. Are we interrupting something? Victor's face had gone pale. His eyes darted between us, trying to assemble pieces that didn't fit the narrative he'd constructed. No, I said. We were just finishing. Annalise, Victor started, but his voice cracked slightly. Elias's expression didn't change. He simply waited, the way powerful people do when they've learned that silence makes others nervous. Who is this? Victor finally managed. I'm Elias. He extended his hand. Annalise's husband. The word hung in the air like a bomb with a delayed fuse. Victor stared at the offered hand, but didn't take it. Around us, phones had materialized. People were filming now, sensing something worth capturing. Husband, Victor repeated numbly. For years this spring, Elias said, lowering his hand without offense. Though we prefer to keep things private. You understand. Victor's gaze swung to me. You're married? Yes. To? He gestured vaguely at Elias, at the suits, at the car visible through the glass. To him. Is there a problem? Elias asked. His tone remained pleasant, but something in it made Victor step back. No. We were just talking. Old acquaintances. From Germany. Oh. Elias nodded. Germany. Annalise has told me about her time there. Difficult period, I understand. Victor's expression flickered. She mentioned me? Not by name, Elias said. But context fills in details, doesn't it? One of the suited men approached and murmured something in Swedish. Elias nodded, then turned back to Victor with that same calm courtesy. I'm afraid we need to go. We have dinner reservations in Luxembourg. But it was interesting to meet you, Mr. Brandt, Victor said automatically. Victor Brandt. Something passed across Elias's face. Recognition, perhaps. Or confirmation. Brandt, he repeated softly. Of course. Well, Mr. Brandt, I hope your business continues to prosper. The way he said business made Victor flinch. Elias guided me toward the exit. I could feel Victor's stare burning into my back. Could sense the crowd's confusion and curiosity. Could hear the whispers starting. Did you see that car? Who is he? She looked so ordinary. We reached the Mercedes. One of the men opened the door. The interior smelled of leather and subtle cologne. As I slid into the seat, I glanced back. Victor stood frozen in the same spot, shopping bag still on the floor, surrounded by gawking strangers with their phones raised. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. Elias settled beside me. The door closed, muffling the outside noise. You didn't tell him, he said. Tell him what? That you knew. That we've known for months. I leaned my head back against the seat. He wouldn't have believed me. Better to let him figure it out himself. He will. The Luxembourg authorities copied us on the initial findings yesterday. Elias pulled out his phone, scrolled briefly. Wire transfers using your identification. Bank accounts opened in your name across 3 countries. Very sophisticated, or so he thought. And my family? His expression sobered. The evidence is clear, Annalise. Your mother's address in Austria was used as a mail drop. Documents were intercepted and forwarded. Your sister's digital signature appears on forms authorizing account changes. I'd suspected. For over a year, I'd suspected. But hearing it confirmed still felt like a knife between the ribs. They helped him, I whispered. They protected themselves, Elias corrected gently. When Victor's scheme started unraveling, he needed someone to blame. Your absence made you perfect. And they. He paused, choosing words carefully. They chose convenience over loyalty. Margot kept asking about money. At dinner. Whether I had a job, a plan. She was checking whether you'd discovered what was done in your name. Whether you'd come back with lawyers or questions. He took my hand. But you came back with neither. You came back quiet. And that terrified them more than any threat would have. The car pulled onto the highway toward Luxembourg. Brussels faded behind us, its spires and glass towers giving way to rolling countryside. What happens now? I asked. Now. Elias smiled, but there was steel beneath it. Now the authorities in 4 countries compare notes. Now Victor's accounts get frozen. Now questions get asked about who helped him commit cross-border fraud. Now your name gets cleared, publicly and legally. And my family? That depends on what the investigation reveals. And what you want. I watched the landscape blur past. Fields. Villages. The border crossing into Luxembourg where guards waved us through without stopping. I want the truth known, I said finally. All of it. Not for revenge. For the record. Elias squeezed my hand. Then that's what you'll have. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. We need to talk. This is not what you think. Margot. Already scrambling. Already preparing her defense. I turned off the phone. She'll try to explain, Elias said, watching me. I know. Will you listen? I thought about the dinner. The accusations. The way she'd looked at me like I was a burden, a failure, an embarrassment. The way she'd asked about money while knowing exactly where my credit had gone. Eventually, I said. But not today. The documents arrived 3 weeks later. Not by email or digital transfer, but in a sealed courier package delivered to our home in Luxembourg. Elias opened it at the breakfast table while I poured coffee, and I watched his expression shift from professional interest to something harder. They've completed the audit, he said quietly. I sat down, and he spread the papers across the table. Bank statements, loan applications, credit agreements, all bearing my signature, or rather, a very good forgery of it. The amount staggered me. Hundreds of thousands of euros, spread across institutions in Germany, Austria, the Netherlands, and Denmark. Victor was more ambitious than we thought, Elias said. He established shell companies in Finland and Ireland using your identity, moved money through them to obscure the trail. When the Finnish authorities started asking questions 2 years ago, he shifted everything to accounts in Copenhagen. And my family? Elias slid another document toward me. An affidavit from the Austrian Postal Service. My mother's address in Salzburg had been registered as a forwarding location for correspondence addressed to me. Bank notices, legal documents, tax forms, all intercepted before I could ever see them. Margot's digital signature appears here. He pointed. And here, authorizing address changes, confirming identity verification. She claimed to be acting on your behalf as your sister. My hands trembled as I lifted the coffee cup. She knew. The whole time, she knew what he was doing. The prosecutor believes she facilitated it. Whether she understood the full scope. He paused. That remains unclear. And my mother? Harder to prove direct involvement. But she allowed her address to be used. She signed for registered mail in your name. Ignorance becomes difficult to claim after a certain point. I stared at the documents. Years of my life, stolen and repackaged. My name attached to debts I'd never incurred, businesses I'd never operated, accounts I'd never opened. All while I was building a legitimate life in Luxembourg, working in consulting firms in Stockholm and Dublin, trying to become someone new. Victor didn't just steal from me, I said slowly. He tried to erase me and replace you with a version he could control, even in absence. Elias gathered the papers carefully. The authorities want to interview you. Formally. In Brussels next week. They're building a criminal case. Against Victor. And anyone who helped him. I thought of Margot at that dinner table, her pointed questions about money and plans. The way she'd looked at me, not with concern, but with assessment. Checking whether I knew. Whether I'd discovered the trap they'd built around my identity. My phone had been ringing for days. Margot. My mother. Even distant cousins I barely remembered. All wanting to talk. All claiming misunderstanding. I hadn't answered any of them. There's more, Elias said, his voice gentler now. The investigation revealed Victor's been running similar schemes for years. You weren't the first. There are at least 3 other women, 2 in Sweden, 1 in Denmark, whose identities he exploited. The coffee turned bitter in my mouth. Why me? Because you left. Because you disappeared without explanation, which made you perfect. No one to contradict him. No one to notice the documents. And a family who, he hesitated, who chose to believe I'd failed rather than question what was happening in my name. He didn't argue. The interview in Brussels took 6 hours. 2 prosecutors, an interpreter though I didn't need one, and a stenographer recording every word. They walked me through the timeline. My departure from Germany. The first fraudulent account opened 3 months later. The pattern of escalation. The mail forwarding. The forged signatures. Did you authorize your sister to act on your behalf? The lead prosecutor asked. No. Did you give your mother permission to receive correspondence addressed to you? No. Were you aware that loans were being taken out in your name? Not until last year. I'd applied for a credit line for my consulting work. It was denied. That's when I started investigating. And that's when you contacted your husband. Elias had connections in cross-border financial oversight. I asked him to look into it quietly. The prosecutor nodded, making notes. Mr. Sundstrom's firm has been very cooperative. His documentation has been invaluable. After the interview, we emerged into gray Brussels afternoon. Reporters had somehow gotten word. Cameras flashed. Questions flew. Ms. Keller, how do you feel about your family's involvement? Will you be pressing charges against your sister? What message do you have for other victims of identity theft? Elias's security moved to create space, but I stopped. Turned toward the cameras. Let them see my face. I'm not a victim, I said clearly. I'm a survivor. And I want anyone else who's been erased by someone they trusted to know this. Your silence doesn't make you weak. Your patience doesn't make you complicit. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is wait for the truth to catch up. What about your family? Someone shouted. I thought of Margot's texts, still unanswered. My mother's voicemails, increasingly desperate. The explanations they wanted to offer. The justifications they'd prepared. Family is supposed to protect you, I said. When they don't, you build a new definition. With people who earn the title. Elias's hand found mine. We walked to the car through the flashing lights and shouted questions. As we pulled away, I saw Victor's face on someone's phone screen, a news article about his arrest. He'd been detained at the Amsterdam airport, trying to board a flight to Dubai. They found evidence of 8 more victims, Elias said, reading his own phone. Across 6 countries. The prosecution is calling it one of the largest cross-border identity fraud cases in European history. I leaned my head against his shoulder. I just wanted my name back. You have it. And now others will get theirs too. 3 months later, the verdicts came. Victor received 12 years. Margot, as a cooperating witness who'd eventually provided evidence, received probation and community service. My mother faced no criminal charges, but was named in civil proceedings. I didn't attend the sentencing. I didn't need to watch Victor in handcuffs or hear Margot's tearful apology to the court. Their consequences weren't my responsibility. My peace was. Instead, I was in Ireland at a consultation meeting for a tech firm in Dublin. After the meeting, I walked along the Liffey as the sun set, turning the water gold. My phone rang. A German number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me. Hello. Anneliese. A woman's voice, young, uncertain. My name is Petra. The prosecutors gave me your number. I'm one of the other. I'm someone Victor hurt. I stopped walking. Hello, Petra. I just wanted to say thank you. For coming forward. For being brave. Because of you, I got my credit cleared. I can buy a house now. Start over. My throat tightened. You don't have to thank me. Yes, I do. You could have stayed quiet. Stayed hidden. But you didn't. After we hung up, I stood on the bridge for a long time, watching the river flow, thinking about the girl who'd left Germany with a suitcase, who'd built herself back piece by piece, who'd learned that strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just refusing to disappear. If this story touched you, remember, betrayal by those closest to us can feel like the end, but endings are also beginnings. Anneliese didn't need her family's validation or Victor's downfall to know her worth. She knew it because she'd built it herself, brick by brick, border by border. When people try to erase you, the most powerful response isn't rage. It's rebuilding. It's standing in your truth so firmly that lies collapse under their own weight. You don't owe explanations to people who never asked with open hearts. And sometimes the family you choose becomes more real than the one you were born into. Keep going. Your silence can be strategy. Your patience, power. And your survival? That's the story that matters most. If this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, share, and comment below. Let's keep these stories alive, together.